Good morning, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Google+. This is Rich again, back for your first video blog of the day for Friday, September 9th, 2016, around 6:30 in the morning in Belleville, Massachusetts. Cloudy out right now, but the clouds will break, and it's going to be hot. Going to be 90 today. Could be one of the last 90-degree days of the year. We'll wait and see about that. Some news to report. The Denver Broncos beat the Carolina Panthers by a score of 21-20 in the first NFL game of the year. The Panthers won't start the year with like 14-0 this year. And also, the Hudson Valley Renegades beat the Lowell Spinners by a score of 5-3, eliminating the Spinners from the playoffs. End of the season for the Spinners. But they had an awesome year. And it's Happy National Bear Day and Happy National Build-A-Bear Day. I bet Build-A-Bear is going to be very busy today because it's National Build-A-Bear Day. I think the sales today will go skyrocket to the top. And 41 years ago today, the classic TV sitcom Welcome Back Kotter made its debut on ABC. It was a hit series for ABC for 4 years. Please excuse Juan Epstein from class today because he was talking to Bruce Capozzi. And 31 years ago today, the nighttime version of The Price is Right was debuted in syndication, hosted by Tom Kennedy, but it only lasted 1 year because it got poor clearances. The New York showed the nighttime version of The Price is Right at 1:35 in the morning after the late night with David Letterman. It was not shown in Boston. And that's about it on the news. My first video blog subject of the day is about the noon balloon to Saskatoon. This was a story about the St. Louis Blues of the National Hockey League almost moving to Saskatoon, Saskatchewan in 1983. Background on the St. Louis Blues. The St. Louis Blues entered the NHL as an expansion franchise in 1967, along with the Canes, the Flyers, the Penguins, and the North Stars, and the California Golden Seals. St. Louis did not submit an expansion bid to the NHL, but the St. Louis Arena was owned by the Woods family, who owned the Chicago Blackhawks, and they had a minor league team in St. Louis, so it would be a natural for St. Louis to have an NHL expansion team. And St. Louis beat Baltimore for the sixth and final NHL team to be added in 1967. And the St. Louis Blues were owned by an insurance agent, Sid Salomon II, and he had his son, Sid Salomon III, and one of the investors of the St. Louis Blues was Baseball Hall of Famer Stan the Man Musial. And the St. Louis Blues renovated St. Louis Arena because it was it was in poor condition during the time the Blackhawks owner owned it, but they renovated it to make it suitable for hockey. And St. Louis Blues made their debut in 1967. And they were a very successful expansion franchise. They made the Stanley Cup Finals the first 3 years in existence, but they got swept each time. And they had a collection of good players who were aging. Big names like Doug Harvey and Dickie Moore and Don McKinney and Al Arba and Jacques Plante and Glenn Hall. And also they had Phil Goat and its first star was Red Bernstein. And Sid Solomon II was a generous owner. He gave his players trips to Florida and brand new cars, and he deferred their salaries. But when he gave them gifts and deferring their salaries, it all caught up to him. By the mid-1970s, the St. Louis Blues were in financial ruins because of the deferred salaries and the team's poor success on the ice, and also of the WHA with so many teams and so little talent. Sid Solomon had to cut his staff down, the front office staff, bare bones, to three employees besides the players. That's unbelievable. The coach at the time, Emile Francis, had to be the president, general manager, and coach of the Blues. And Sid Solomon was putting his team up for sale in 1977. And somebody stepped up to the plate. Purina Foods bought the Blues in 1977, and they renamed the St. Louis Arena the Saksatoon. And even though the St. Louis Blues got a lot of success in the early 1980s with stars as Brian Sutter and Bernie Fidelko and Mike Liut, they were not a success in the box office. The team was continuing to lose money. They couldn't afford to have minor league players. They only had a handful of minor league players every single year. The Blues were continuing to lose money, and by 1983, Purina Dog Food just decided to get out of the hockey business because they had a turnover on the chairman, and the chairman says he was focusing on the pet food, not on a money-losing hockey team. And he tried to sell the St. Louis Blues to local ownership, but they didn't have any local ownership coming up to the plate, and he had to look out of town. And he found a buyer. It was Bill Hunter, who was the founding owner of the Edmonton Oilers, and he put together a group. They were going to buy the St. Louis Blues and move him to Saskatoon, Saskatchewan in Canada. And it was called the Noon Balloon to Saskatoon because on the night of the NHL draft, the St. Louis Blues did not send a representative to the 1983 NHL entry draft, so they couldn't draft any players, and the NHL owners voted it down for the St. Louis Blues to move to Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, because Saskatoon only had a population at a time of less than 300,000 people, and the arena was, substandard for the NHL, and a lot of the owners were concerned that if the Blues moved to Saskatoon, they would be in financial trouble as well, and they didn't want to lose St. Louis, so the deal was blocked off. Purina Dog Food just padlocked the Saskatone, and they turned the ownership to the team, to the NHL. The St. Louis Blues were on the verge of contraction until somebody bought them. It was Harry Ornstein. He was an LA businessman. He bought them at a bargain basement price. He saved the franchise from being eliminated. and he renamed the Checker Dome to St. Louis Arena. And he owned the Blues for the next 4 seasons. And he, turned the team's success around. Most of its players for the St. Louis Blues during the time Ornstein owned the team deferred a lot of their salaries because they wanted to stay in St. Louis. But they always got paid in the end, and the Blues had success in 1986, making it to the conference finals. In 1987, Ornstein sold the St. Louis Blues to a local businessman in St. Louis, Mike O'Shanahan, and they took off as having a success with Brett Hall there, and a new arena was opened in 1994, named for Scott Trade Center. I wonder what would have happened if the St. Louis Blues moved out of St. Louis and moved to Saskatchewan, Saskatoon. I don't think they would have had much success in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, because if they moved there in 1983, they would have Canadian teams would have had a share of money with Saskatoon, and plus a substandard NHL arena. Only 12,000 I heard in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. It would have worked out. This team, they probably would have had it move within a few years, or probably would have had it folded. But that's probably one of the infamous things in NHL history. It was called the Noon Balloon to Saskatoon, and luckily it didn't happen. But this is probably maybe almost a dark day for the NHL if that did happen. That's about it on that. I will be back later. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Google Plus with 2 more video blogs. One will be about Pro Fitness Plus in Billerica, Massachusetts, the workout place. And the third and final video blog of the night, the personality profile. Tonight's personality profile will be about WWE Hall of Fame manager and former WCW Commissioner J.J. Dillon, as what Chris Jericho used to call him, JoJo. Keep calm, everybody. I'm a Julia Butter guy. Marley Roseblood of WCCO accidents, nice legs. Elizabeth Hutt, so stunning, she's the best. Amy Sweezy's awesome. Awesome Amy. Linda Church of WPIX Channel 11 has a rocking smile and the best legs in New York City. And Bobby Gibbons of ABC 11 has a sweet Southern accent. And in the word of Dee Patel last week, no, but see you later.